Welcome to LinkedIn Live. Super excited today. I have with me a good friend and a very talented BIM coordinator and the head of BIMbc Vancouver. Edwin, thanks for working with me on this presentation.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, this is one that I know has generated some interest. We did a survey recently and people are very excited about Open BIM.
Yeah. And so it's great to have you with us, the community in BIMbc, those who wanted to join. And we're also streaming live on LinkedIn. So we got 10 people joining in. So and on Twitter as well, I tried this time. So we're casting a wide net. Just before we get going on to our discussion about half-baked BIM, what's going on with BIMbc? Obviously, you advocate for better BIM usage in the industry. What are your short-term and long-term goals?
Yeah, well, we've slowly started growing our leadership team to include different voices and perspectives. We've historically been a way for people to connect and network with other industry professionals to promote best practices, and we did that through live events before COVID, and now we're hoping to gear up to have some live events later this year. And yeah, we're glad that some of these virtual presentations allow us to maintain those connections.
Great. Now, can people join? Obviously, in BC, they can join. Can they join across Canada as well? Is that something?
Yeah, we have some people even internationally that are part of our meetup group. So if you are trying to connect and you Google our name, the meetup site is your best bet. You can sign up for free, and then you'll be getting notifications whenever we have an event announced. And I think we may have lost you, Joe. But yeah, maybe I can speak a little bit about our survey, some of the highlights. People are ready for live events, and they've indicated that virtual events are still of interest. Live events, they want them to be recorded if possible. And we also had a different topics of interest there. Open BIM was one of the most highly rated. So Libre being a tool that uses industry foundation classes, IFC file format is definitely part of that. We'll see how it fits in with the rest of it. There's also a lot of interest in AI, artificial intelligence, and how it can be used. We have some exciting developments in our industry. If you haven't tried Midjourney for generating images, or I believe Veritas from Evolve Lab for producing renderings very quickly, those are things that are definitely, we're trying to just find the right people to showcase.
Edwin, thanks so much. I seem to have dropped off there right off the bat.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
So hopefully everything goes well. Thanks for covering there.
For sure.
So I'm sure everything you said was great. I missed it, unfortunately. And so thanks for everyone's patience.
It's recorded, don't worry.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah. So let's get into our discussion on BIM. I want to run this by you and our audience. This expression, I cut the board 3 times and it is still too short. Isn't this what we're experiencing in BIM? We keep trying over and over again, right? We're doing our best, but we still can come up short sometimes on every project. Stuff gets missed. There's errors. Is that what you observe, Edwin?
Yeah, and it goes without saying that maybe due to the deadlines, we're pressed for time, right? We're trying to rush, and things get missed, things that could be avoided inevitably.
Yeah. So then when we talk about when things go wrong, things can go either wrong in a small way. I heard this expression, I guess maybe we missed it we'll catch it in the shop drawings. Well, sometimes I think we miss it in the shop drawings, and it can create a problem, right? So just curious, I'm going to skip this slide for a second, but I was wondering if you or our audience, you and our audience could just share a story just before you're going, if you're able to, if you're legally able to, about something that you missed that was small in a project, or something that got missed, but it led to a big problem later. We look forward to some comments from you and our audience there.
Yeah, maybe To get it started, one thing that comes to mind was there was like a floor drain in a recessed entry mat that got missed in one project, and it got caught quite late in the game. So then it caused a series of issues of like, okay, we have to get it in the drawings. Structural has to slope their slab and thicken it in certain spots, and it was quite a nightmare. Yeah.
Right. And really, it was a small thing missed. Probably cost a couple $100 if you had caught it early. But what did it cost later? You think about it, right?
I don't think anyone did the math or wants to, but
right.
That's why things are expensive in our industry.
Right. That's an interesting observation. So then I asked this question about the ripple effect. Like a single issue sometimes can just be a single issue, but sometimes it can ripple, causing multiple delays, multiple problems, right? And the hours of paperwork, the cost, the project delays, the various trades, designers, it can be a significant cost. Like you say, easily tens of thousands of dollars, easily. So then we'd still like to hear from our audience. So if you can share a story, we'd love to hear it, and make sure you can actually hear us as well. So just feel free to, if you can, share a story about something small you missed that caused a huge problem. So, and we're not going to spend a lot of time in PowerPoint Live, but we just want to establish this. Errors are going to happen. Issues are going to happen. But when these are caught late, what happens? They cost more. The further down a project we go, the costs accelerate. Do you agree with that, Edwin?
For sure. We see that all the time.
Right. So when we introduce a software called Celebri, now Celebri, not many people know about it, right? Maybe they've heard about it. But when we talk about Celebri, I don't mean to oversimplify it. But really, Celebri, in a very simple way, is about finding the problems earlier. That's really all it is. So a problem that you find, let's say, in construction, normally, maybe you'll find in pre-construction. Well, is that a cheaper problem to solve? For sure, right? Or maybe in design development, you realize there's a code issue when maybe you could have caught it in schematic design, and you would have saved some rework. So it's really just about shifting things back to the left. And every time we do that, there's a potential to save time and effort. So if we position Celebri in that sense, it's just about finding the errors before they become obvious. And this is the key. This is part of the key to preventing this half-baked BIM idea. We'll talk more about that. Now, the Celebri itself, there's like 4 different versions of it. And Celebri is the tool we're going to talk about today to help us to bring this back down, to bring problems, to prevent them from happening. We're going to mostly focus on Celebri Office, which is kind of what a VDC manager or a BIM manager would use. But as well, Celebri Anywhere is a free IFC viewer. And so, in fact, in the first part of my demo, everything I show you will work, except for maybe one thing, with Celebri Anywhere. So there's value in keeping an eye on those 2 products. Now, I understand, Edwin, just briefly, you have worked with Celebri or been in an office that used it?
Yes, yeah, it's been probably 3 years. But yeah, we found it quite helpful. Yeah, the building rules specifically, and checks that once we built them, we could just run again and again on future projects.
Nice. Okay. We did have a comment here. We just want to say, I work for a small company in Europe. Thanks, Zoltan, for your comment. The fire-protected gypsum board walls can be moved later, changed to concrete, and they forgot to tell me. And since this obviously caused a problem with the pipes in the shaft, right? So it was $500 in designing cost that this prevented. Probably had delays as well beyond that, and probably added administrational time. But it is true that this effort was wasted, possibly because the error came up too late. So thank you so much, Zoltan, for sharing. And feel free if you have any questions or comments, we will address them in this live presentation. So just to position Celibri, like we already have a lot of tools that do clash detection, right? We have Navisworks, we have the Autodesk products that do clash detection. There's many fine products out there. I would argue that these equal, and there's no knock against Navisworks, but although people do like to knock Navisworks, I find that Navisworks works great as a basic checkup, right? It's going to find what's obvious. Do you agree with that, Edwin?
Oh yeah, and even some things, yeah, like pipe networks can be like multiple clash. It doesn't quite understand, no, that something is connected. So it's each individual pipe is kind of a clash in its system, no, and that's one where Solibri we found quite helpful in kind of understanding that relationship, that is one clash, it's not 1,000 clashes.
Right. So false positives can be a problem for sure in Navisworks, where you go to the doctor and you describe some symptoms and he tells you, oh, I think you have a tumor. You're dying right now. So that can happen. But clash detection is good. It's just it's basic. It's what you see on the outside.
Well, the reality is, yeah, not all clashes are like there's issues, right? There's issues that are not clashes.
That's right.
You have a column in front of a window. That's bad design, right? So
yeah,
Navisworks is not going to catch that. Yeah.
Right. And so we're not positioning Celibri necessarily that it has to replace Navisworks, but it's almost like an enhancement to, it'd be something you would add to your stack. It's like taking an x-ray. This is where you're going to penetrate deep into things and see more of the model. You're going to get a better sense of what's going on at a deep level and create some deeper analysis, right? So it's like now clash detection is level 1, and this would be level 2. We see value in going to level 2 though on every project. Like there's in no question that's what we see, but we'd like to hear what everyone else thinks as we move through our presentation. So then just to highlight in Celibri, what you do is you kind of design your own workflow. So, but there's basically 5 basic components in my mind. A VDC manager might use all 5 of them. Someone on site might use only 1 of them. So you can mix and match this any way you want, depending on who you are. Celibri is a multi-purpose tool and a very precision tool, all wrapped into one. But first of all, what happens with Celibri is just to give us the overall, we open up, we take IFC files from our native BIM software. Of course, IFC files are like, if you don't know what those are, they're kind of like the PDF of BIM. They're BIM files that everyone can open. So if someone working on Tekla and Revit, they coordinate with IFC. The difference here is that IFC is the fuel of Celibri. It's a first-class citizen in Celibri. So everyone exports their IFCs and they come into Celibri Model Checker, and that's the native format in Celibri. At that point, we bring them in, it optimizes them, we can combine them, we can query them, we can navigate. The next step is classification. Now, we'll get more into this as we go through our demonstration. I consider it 2 things: to be able to rationalize the data and visualize the data. To visualize the data is obvious. Show me the fire rated walls. So we graphically can see the fire rated walls. Of course, you can do that often as well in your native BIM software. But to rationalize the data, what it means is sometimes the data comes in, maybe they called it a washroom, maybe they called it a WC, maybe they call it men's. They have different names of things in the BIM models, and we have to rationalize it for our own logic. We have to kind of smooth the bumpy edges off the data. So the classification, again, is something a BIM manager would probably do, especially on the rationalized side. But a normal non-BIM manager could visualize the data with it. The next thing is checking. Here's the real power. This is what people think of with Celibri is the rule check manager, the rule set manager. We create custom rules, we check, we do deep interrogation. After that, how do we communicate these issues out? Well, Celibri has something called a BCF Live connector. So it can connect to virtually all the collaboration platforms out there. that handle issues such as BIMtrack, BIM Collab, these type of sites. And it can synchronize these issues with them. And as well, there's also the ability to do quantity takeoff. Okay. So not everyone's going to use all of these. A VDC manager probably will. But various people in an organization will use various parts of these for their workflow they need. And then there's just a lot of different ways we can apply this once we see how it all works. So I'm just gonna go over here. I am just going to minimize my. Just gotta move my screen over. 1 second, because we're gonna take a look at a demo. We're gonna go out of PowerPoint land, and I'm gonna try to present my screen. Okay, so we're going to just present share screen. So I've started Celebri up here, and basically we have these 3 IFC files. Now again, these were made from a native BIM software. In this case, I believe all these came from ArchiCAD. We'll have some Revit examples soon as well. And they're pretty small files, right? So altogether, this project is less than 50 megabytes. So it's already been reduced from the size that it was when we brought in our Celebri, brought it from our BIM model. We're just going to open Celebri Office here. And what we're going to do, we're just going to take a look at. Okay, and we're just going to open some models. And we're going to find these 3 files here, these 3 folders. And we're just going to hit open. Now, when I hit open, it's actually not opening the IFC, so it's a little misleading there. What it's doing is it's bringing them into Celebri, and it's converting them into a single file format. So remember that first stage of combining or federating our project again? Well, that's what we're doing. Now, if the IFC data of these files was accurate, it would have had this information. But we're just going to go in here. We'll just indicate the discipline of these models. Okay. So now everything we do from now on will show up as, it will be something you can do in the free software or the demo software in this, or the full version. What can you do inside of Celebri? Well, right off the bat, there's a search button up here. So we're able to actually Google our BIM model. So if we were to go to SideLight, for example, we know that there's some objects that have that. I'm able to Google the model and find just that information. Now, if you've ever thought, all this data that could come in, you're able to Google it, right? What if we want to display just certain parts of this model? So I'm going to go to my HVAC here. I'm just going to press enter, and that's going to show me my HVAC, or maybe I'll go to my structure. Okay. Okay. And perhaps I want to see the architectural kind of wrapped around it. I'm just going to show the architectural. So a very nice navigation. The architectural is grayed back, and our structure is very visible as well. I'm going to press 0, press on and cut a section through here, through our model. So very easy to kind of get around our model, navigate. Now, one thing that comes up with, you had mentioned before, Edwin, is that not all the data comes on an IFC. There's data missing, and the data missing is what? It's the sheets, right? So, in fact, I'm going to go full screen here, and then we can.
Yeah, because often not everything gets modeled, or things get faked, right? With detail lines or 2D.
Yeah. That's very true. So what I have here is I have a little video here. We'll just take a quick look how you could actually import a PDF as well into Celebri. So you can overlay the 2D and the 3D geometry. Let's just take a look at that. So we see I just did that same trick where I press 0, got my section box. I'm cutting through my model, right? Now I'm going to go and bring in a PDF. Actually, kind of the same way you'd bring in an IFC model. The PDF's kind of handled the exact same way, right? And the video is shortened. It takes about a minute for that to populate, but it's shortened. Now you can see the PDF isn't the right scale, so we have to go and set the scale of it so that it scales properly to our model. Okay. And as well, there's a little button here to align it. So you just pick a point on one coordinate, pick a point on another, then I'll add it 4 feet up. And what we're going to see is that it's going to overlay our 2D and our 3D geometry. Now, other software platforms do this as well, like Revisto and BIMtrack. So I'm not saying this is the only platform to do it, but Celibri is more of a work environment for quality control, and you might need this functionality in Celibri as well. So we're just going to set it to 4 feet and apply. And we end up with our lovely 2D and 3D orientated, visible to each other.
And I guess, is this a view that you could save, Joe?
Yes. So we can save this as a view. As well, we're able to control whether that PDF is turned on or turned off at various times. We could also put a section through here and flip it vertically. So where the section would cut on the reference line, you can show the 2D geometry. So that's very interesting. Now, when it comes to there's something here that allows us to really kind of navigate around. It's just kind of like, it's called the selection basket. So let's say I'm gonna go here and I want to see I'm gonna just navigate my model just a little bit more, and I'm just gonna go to beams. So I'm able to navigate through the model in a whole pile of way. I want to show all the beams. So this shows all the beams in our architectural and our structural. I'm going to remove my architectural, so I'm just going to click here. Okay, so now I just have the structural beams. Now I'm going to go into the data here and say, actually, I don't want to see the first floor beams or the second floor or the third floor. So now that I have this data set up this way, I can just save this and say, this is a selection set with second floor beams. And there you go. Now I can flip between this. I'll just add another one so we can flip between it. I'll go back and I'll just maybe just do HVAC, and we'll do structural, and I'll just add one here. So we'll say mechanical and structural. We're able to save these as selection baskets, and we can use these for filtering later, for doing all kinds of things. Now I can flip between these so easily, or go back and show everything. Celibri is very easy to navigate that way. It takes this highly dense data and makes it very consumable. So let's take a look. Just checking for questions. We're happy to handle questions as we go along. Our audience is a little bit quiet. That's okay. Maybe something will come up as we go. What we can also do with Celibri is we go through and we have our checking tab here. So we'll talk about this. This is the heart of our discussion, is how do we check with Celibri. There's a communication tab where we organize our issues, as we mentioned. Information tab, again, is very nice for either visualizing our data. I want to see all the beams. Now we can do all of this in the free version. So imagine project managers could just open an IFC, a federated IFC, and just view all this data, right? So this is super powerful stuff. And as well, we have our BCF Live connector. So this is where we can kind of connect to something. In this case, I'm connecting to BIMtrack. It could be other software as well. And then once we authenticate, if my Mac allows it, what'll happen is we'll be able to download any issues that are based in the project from outside here. Just gotta hit. I'm not a robot. That's the thing I didn't hit. Okay. Okay. So for whatever reason, I'm just waiting here for it to authenticate, but it's just kind of not. So that allows us to connect to all the issues in the mothership, and we can download them in Celibri, and then any issues we add in Celibri will come back. I'm just having a sign-on problem here, so please overlook that. That wasn't a major part of our discussion anyways. When we go to our checking tab, here's where we're going to spend a lot of time, because here's where we can do this deep dive into Celibri. And we have these rules we can set up, and we can report on things. I just want to give a very brief example from our from a video I have of creating a rule. Now imagine if you had a project with multiple beams, and you had 100 columns, and one of the columns isn't touching. How do you find that one column, right? It's like a needle in a haystack. Well, I have a brief video here that'll show how to create a rule faster than you could manually find that. So I'm going to flip over to column and beams. We're just going to show this video here. So one of these columns isn't touching properly. So I go over into my rule set manager in Celibri and create a new workspace. There's these libraries of all kinds of templates for pre-configured rules. And basically what we're doing is we're going to say, okay, well, I want to make sure items touch. I want to make sure my columns, okay, are touching my beams. And again, we have the opportunity to give a clearance for this, right? But I can just flip over to my task and check model, and it found one example. The one example out of 100. So how else would you have found that? How
just clicking one by one, Joe.
You could have found it in a scheduled Revit, though, couldn't you? You could have found it somehow in Revit, maybe. Well, no, not necessarily. Yeah. So, I guess the bigger danger is that normally you're not even looking for that, right? So you'd never even think to look. Well, maybe it's not connected. This is how mistakes creep in, but we have trouble finding them without a product like Celibri. So what we're going to do now is take a look. Now, this is an example that, I kind of asked Edwin, give me some examples of things that break or kind of cause problems. And there's this one issue of drains. Drains need to be in mechanical rooms, right? But they also maybe should be in a washroom. So I kind of want to stop and think this through. If you flip up the top of your toilet and you look at the little $2 pieces, right, that cost $2, but they're actually made for 30 cents in the East. These little pieces are what stop an apartment building from flooding. Right? One of those pieces goes, and you could cause $1 million of damage. Right? So then the way you can kind of mitigate that risk is having a drain. So do you have a drain in your mechanical room? Should you have a drain in your washrooms, right? Well, these are good discussions to have, but then how do you go and check to make sure every project conforms to this? So Edwin, did you have some insight onto this actual topic?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I don't believe the code has the requirement, but it is considered best practice, and some clients actually have design standards that require at least one floor drain in every washroom. The problem is, like, sometimes these get added late in the game, so then who's checking? That's what it comes down to.
Right. So, and I like what you say there, because when something is a variable, at least let's say if you run this Celibri check on every project, well, at least then and you can have the discussion. And maybe you can send an email quickly off to the client. Oh, just so you know, there's no drains in any of the washrooms. If you would like this to be changed, please advise us, right? So let's talk about how we could do that. Now I'm going to switch a little more to live. And of course, anything can happen when you go live. So you know, please bear with me. And again, I created a very simple building in Revit. This is, you know, obviously I'm better at Revit than this shows, but very simple, because we just want to kind of try to understand the problems we have to say, okay, in mechanical rooms and washrooms, we want to alert ourselves if there's drains or not, right? So we have rooms here. I'm just going to turn on my rooms. We have rooms there, and I can turn on my text here. So there's lots of different options where if I turn on my text, I should be able to see the text in there. Now that's not out of a PDF. That's Celebri generated text that says that this room is called women's 2, men's. And then we have a washroom over here, right? And then we have a mechanical room over there. So what we want to do is we want to build a check that allows us to say, hey, if it's a washroom or a mechanical room, tell me if it doesn't have a drain. So if you notice, I actually have a few drains. I have 2 drains over here, but I don't have drains in the other one. So there's 2 parts of this problem we have to solve to make this work in a software like Celebri. Number 1, we have to know what's a washroom. And number 2, well, and a drain. But we'll assume that's an easy part. And then number 2, we have to say, well, is there a drain? We need a rule to check. Is there a drain in one of these things called a washroom? Here's where, when we talk about classifications, it's very important to understand. Because the data that comes in might be fuzzy logic data, right? It might not be, it might not say washroom on it, right? It might say women's, men's, WC. So classifications allow us to rationalize that data so that it's ready to make a rule. So if you'll bear with me, I'm just going to go in here and create a rule. So I'm just going to click in here and create a new classification. I'm going to call it spaces, the generic name. And I'm only going to look for things. I'm only going to classify spaces. So I'm not going to do anything else, just spaces. Now, when I flip over my classification rules, here's where I can go add a space. What is the name? Well, the name is, I'm going to say men, star, men, star, and that's going to go to something called washroom. Okay. So any space that has the name men/men, it becomes classified as a washroom. I'm going to go down here. I'm just going to change it and add a WO here. Right? Anything that says woman is going to be classified as a washroom. And then anything, again, we could have WC in there as well, but I'm actually going to classify anything that's called a washroom as a washroom. Now, mechanical room, again, we'll go in here, space. Here's where I'll just say mechanical. Okay, and I'm going to change the classification on this to mechanical. There we go. Now, the offices were different because I don't know if you can see here, the offices are named by the people. So it's like Judy and Bob. So we can't use the logic, but we could access other metadata. We could access any metadata. So in this case, I'm actually grabbing, I'm not going to do it, but I could grab the department that that's associated with and assign a classification to that, right? So the department is general office. So that becomes classified as office, right? But for simplicity, we're going to leave that off. And there's a kitchen in here too, but we're going to leave that off. So now I'm just going to go back here, and all I'm basically going to do is add washroom. I'm just going to add my colors in here, just so I can have some colors showing and some transparency. Just give me a second. I know this is kind of the longer part of the demo, but and we'll just go green and go green at that. And mechanical, and we'll add. Do we have another one? No, we just have the 2. So we're going to remove that guy. Okay. So now I'm just going to say okay. Now, when I go into my spaces, you can see it classified these as washrooms, right? And that as mechanical. I can go back and tweak it and add this as kitchen. Not a problem, but we're just going to keep going. And again, we could classify these as offices, but we just want to keep it moving here. So now I have a classification called spaces that properly associate. These are the same. In this world, these 3 things are the same, right? We'll go to elements just to make sure that the drain is classified, and it is. So the drain is classified as a drain, and we can access it. All right. So that's the first part of our problem. The washrooms now are rationalized as washrooms. and the drain knows it's a drain. Now that we have that pre-work set up, we're just going to go to our rule set manager. The rule set manager is almost like the Revit family manager. It's a separate room you go to, and it's a place where you kind of can create some rules, or just like you do in Revit, you create families. But this is like the Celebri family editor kind of. I'm going to create a new work set. Oh yeah, and it prompts me here. It's a little gotcha. You always want to click on there. We have a new rule set there. And what we're going to do is we're just going to turn on library. Sometimes I dock these guys, right? And I know there's a rule 225, a default rule. So I'm going to Google in here 225. Okay. This takes me out of libraries into a rule here called number of components in space. Okay. So we're just going to take this guy and we're going to drag him down here. Okay. So this is creating from a template. Okay. You can also, if you notice, there's actually, if you were to search drain, you're going to hate me now. If we search drain, there's actually some example files that actually has this exact rule in it over here. So we could have actually grabbed an example file, like one that was populated already. We might have to change it. So there's two ways to create rules, is that we either use the template or the library from scratch, but it's still a template, or we switch over and we grab a sample from another project or from another, they're called resources. Okay, but we have this in any event. Now we just have to go in here, and now we're just got to go over here and change our parameters so that now here's where we have to tell it the two different classifications we're working with. We're going to go to spaces and we're going to go to elements, right? And space and elements. Now we're going to go in here and add, and we're going to go spaces. We're going to say mechanical, and for component, we're going to go drain. How many do we want? We want a minimum of 1, and there really is no maximum. We'll just say 10. Right? We'll hit X to get out of there. We should rename this to say this is mechanical room must have drain. I'm going to take this guy. I think I can just copy him as well and just paste him in here, because it's actually the same role. It did a nested role, but I'll just move it around here. So now I'm just going to change this guy. I'll say washroom. Maybe I'll change the rule and I'll say washroom might need drain. Right? We can also control this with severity. The mechanical room not having a drain is a bigger problem than the washroom not having a drain. So there's kind of some options there. So I'm just going to go to my views, go to parameters. Again, here we go. I have this pre-populated with mechanical. I just got to go change it to washroom, and the drain is there, except for we're going to say the maximum is 1. We don't want more than 1 drain. Okay, so here's where we can actually tell it this is a lower severity or a high severity. So we might set this as a low severity, right? It's something we need to be aware of. I'm going to go out of here, check out of there. And now when I flip over back to my project, what we're going to see is that's that new rule set that I have here, right? There's my 2 rules. I just hit check model. Both of them came up with the high severity because we didn't change the severity. Mechanical room must have a drain. So this mechanical room here does not have a drain, right? Washroom might need a drain by clicking here, and we'll see what happens there. Okay, so it picks up on this. If I found only one example of this washroom here. Now, why again did it not have a problem over here? Well, it's because they have drains, right? So if we click over here, we can see the 2 drains in the washroom. These pass the test, right? These 2 rooms failed the test. So then what do we do there? Well, that's where we can create what's called an issue or a slide, and then make an issue and then assign it back to someone using the BCF format, using the tools like BIMcloud, BIMtrack, right? Now we can tell them, this can be alerted to someone that they can decide to put the drain in. We can assign it to mechanical to put the drain in, or we can assign it to architectural, decide whether we should have drains in this project. Right? But either way, we're handling our risk of not having that drain. And it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars of liability, or the cost of drilling into the concrete, drilling into the wood, putting that drain in, reattaching to everything. Could be tens of thousands of dollars, right? We'll manage the risk earlier in the project. And then if there's a need to add the drain, it's very easy to do so at less cost. Edwin, did you have a thought? Did that work okay?
Yeah, I mean, it's worth emphasizing that you can build and nest this as a sort of like knowledge repository, right, of your project. So there could be like thousands, or well, maybe not thousands, but at least hundreds maybe of rules, that are issues that have come up, and this is a way of running through them. It might take a slightly longer to run, but then you got all your bases covered, and you can go through and see what's non-compliant and if it is a problem or not.
Right. Yes. And that is very true. It's these rules can exist with hundreds of others, and they can just go bing, and we can decide to ignore it if we want to, when we realize this wasn't a big deal, right? But it's not a big deal until it becomes a big deal to miss a drain. And then when it becomes a big deal, it's a very big deal at times, right? So Solibri allows us to find this kind of thing. Now, if we were to think about in our BIM software, the room is architectural, the drain is mechanical, or it's probably placed by mechanical, probably architecture doesn't place it. So, or maybe architectural places one, but mechanical, did they place one? So how would we handle that in normal BIM software? Like, how would you find that error? Maybe there's some kind of schedule you can create. But it's hard.
Yeah, well, I mean, Dynamo comes to mind. No, you could use that, but there's quite an effort investment in doing that, maintaining it, making sure it doesn't break.
Yeah.
This is a rule that you can you give me another 1,000,000 square feet building, and I can run this through.
Right. So as long as the classification, like some of the classifications might have to be tweaked per project, but once this rule is set up, like you say, you can now export this out, and we can save this to our typical rule set that we deploy in other projects. Okay. Appreciate the feedback there. Now, we're gonna take a look at a different model here. Just a few more examples. So we'll go into Solibri, and let's go to our clinic. Oh, doesn't like, somehow I'm in that project already. Okay, well, we'll see what this version gives us. Okay. Let's move into the aspect of, again, very similar. This is a federated model with architectural, mechanical. This is a very nice model because it has a lot of stuff in it. So if we flip over to our mechanical, really helps us see, and we're going to turn off our section planes. Or we'll go here first, and then we'll turn it to mechanical, right? So lots of stuff going on there. We have our spaces shown there, so we'll just turn that off. So again, very easy to pull up this data, even with the free version, and just quickly navigate around it. It's quite cool. Let's add the structural in here. Structural, mechanical. There you go. Okay. You can see we have outlets. We have different things going on here. So another thing that can get missed often is, do we have a light switch within a meter of a door? So let's take a look at an example there. So this rule is 224. the default. So let's go to our rule set manager. I'll click on there, create a rule set, call it BIMbc. So we'll start creating our rules for BIMbc. And there again, I'm going to search. I know the number. I'm cheating a bit. I don't have to browse, but not terribly hard. There's rule 224, which is, nope, that's not the rule. So we'll say, is it 2? Now I'm going to have to browse. We'll turn libraries on. Here's where all the Celebri people are thinking. They can comment and tell me what's rule is that. We're doing the, oh, yeah, so it's called component distance is the rule. So it's 222. 222, yep. So we'll take this guy, we'll drag it there. And here again, component distance. And we'll say light switch in 1 meter. Again, as another example, the light switches are coming in from the electrical model, right? The door is architectural. So they're two different models, right? How do we do this any other way? But in Celebri, they both come in, they get federated, and they become one database, right? So we can do this little check. Although 3 feet might be a better thing for Canada, depending on who you work for. Let's just go in here and let's take a look to our parameters, right? So what are we going to do here? Well, I'm just going to double click. So I'm just going to check my notes just to make sure I don't mess anything up. The distance we want is it's like 3 feet. The maximum allowed distance is 3 feet. So then what do we want to check? The first thing we go in here is we want to say any doors, right? Architectural, and we'll say door. Okay. Now we could add additional properties, what type of doors, yada, yada. We're going to go over here and we're going to say the target thing. And depending on the version I have, I may have to change this. We're going to say anything. And we're going to go to, I'm just going to go to my classifications to see if this version has my classifications. MEP, because under MEP and is one of, I classified stuff as light switches already. So I went through, I classified a couple things in that MEP. So I'm going to get all the light switches. There's various types, but I've classified them all as one thing, as a light switch. So there again, the classifications are playing into part there. Otherwise, I might have to indicate every single type of light switch, right? So the classification is simplifying that process. I want it to be in the same space, right? And the minimum number is 1. I want 1 by every door. I mean, when you go in a door, you want a light switch there, right? And now I had 3 inches there. That's a problem. We'll go to 3 feet. Okay. And I'm going to just X out of here, flip back into Celebri, my checking tab. Okay, that's a previous example from before, but I'll run this one. So I'll just remove this other guy, or we'll disable these other ones, right? And we'll click here and we'll go check model. So it found a bunch. Now, I love this because when I click on the first floor, not only it shows me kind of the door, and it really helps me to see, okay, there's no switch around this door, and it's 8 feet to the other side where there is a switch. This one's not an error condition, right? Because there's a switch within a meter. But on the other side, it is an error condition because there's no switch here, right? I mean, without taking the X-ray of the building with Celebri, how would you even be able to do that? I guess you'd manually check it. But then how can you? Every time you'd have to remember to manually check it. Like,
who has the time? Yeah.
Who has the time? Right? And so it's no big deal. Light switches is light switch. They're going to catch it on site more likely than anything. It's probably not a change order, but still, it's the principle of these things are easy until they're not, right? Then when they're not, they're not. We'll do one last example. Okay, and this is a code example. So can we check for building code items? Violations, absolutely. Now, the problem is building codes are quite complex. And so there's not a one-to-one translation between how we could use a rule and how we could apply it to building code review. And And of course, throughout Canada, we have multiple building codes. So I'm not going to pretend, please don't get the impression that this is just a turnkey solution, because it's not. And even if someone were to build it, there'd be so many variations in it, it'd be hard to get used. But take something very small, the turning radius and barrier free. Could this be a rookie mistake? Someone told me we hire someone new, we hire new Revit people, and they're sometimes not as skilled as we want. We want to be able to check them. That's what someone said to me. Well, let's take a look. I believe there is a rule called 209. Okay, and we'll go in here and we'll go rule set folder, and we'll go to our, there's a bunch of them already in this project, but we'll go here. So I'm going to do that again. 209. In our library, the rule is free floor space. So I'm going to bring that to my BIMbc, and I'm going to say washroom, barrier free, turning radius. Yes, I might be wrong. I think there's an I in there. We're going to go with that. So let's take a look at our views here as well. How can we do this with Solibri? How is something this magical even possible? We have our space users here, and we have our, we'll just go to our element grouping. Okay. I do have notes on this just in case I fail it. So we're just going to take a look, get the notes open. So what we basically have to do is we add from our space usage, we just have to add the different spaces we have here. So we'll go okay. Okay. And this is going to be our bathroom. Go to the next one. This one's going to be our WC, because they didn't classify in this project the same way I did. So we have to go through all these examples. And this next example is accessible. There we go. So then what's the requirement here? Go in here, and this is all pre-built for you. It's not like we're coding this from scratch. I want a 5-foot turning radius on all of these. Sorry, I actually have to click there. I'll probably have to go back and fix that. Okay, go there. Yep, okay, got it. And go here. Okay, so this is not solving all your building code issues all in one shot, but it's solving one of your building code issues, right? The turning radius. Let's go in here. I'm going to flip back over to my checking tab. And again, we have this now. And we're going to just run the check on that. And that was a hit. Why was that a hit? Because you cannot, in this space, have access to the 5 feet for the turning radius. Right? That's with how the door is orientated and how the sink is laid out, how the bathroom is so this does not meet the requirements for a barrier-free washroom. And at least knowing that is good, but maybe you intended it to be, so now you have to get someone to change that. All right, so let's try to recap here. The margin of error in baking a cake, when we talk about baking a cake, is pretty small, right? So maybe the guy who baked this cake, he got 90% of it right. Like 90%. You think that's pretty good, right? But maybe he didn't quite, maybe he didn't quite sift the flour. Maybe he didn't quite whip the white separate from the yolks, right? Or your suggestion was, Edwin, it was like, maybe this was an ice cream cake and shouldn't have been put in the oven, right?
Yeah.
But missing a few steps can drastically affect the outcome. So doing the right steps in the right order at the right time is actually critical to baking a cake. And with Solibri, with BIM, it's the same. What Solibri really helps us to do is it really helps us to create our own recipes, our own procedures, our own workflows to ensure that every cake turns out, every project turns out at a high standard, right? And that includes not just, the drawings that we show people, the pictures are PDFs, but also handing over perhaps a better quality BIM model to the people we work for who could use this down the road. So this is the bulk of how to prevent half-baked BIM. Is to use a quality assurance tool like Celebri that helps us to find the issues early. Now, in terms of just a follow-up, I just want to, like, we do Fusion Tech, the company, my own company, we sell Celebri in Canada. So if you're interested in learning more, we're happy to help you. Also, we're running a course. Sometimes it's good to take a course before you buy software anyways. So we're running a course in a few weeks, just for 3 hours a day, which you have access to the recordings. So if you'd like to attend that, and because you attended today, there's a coupon code for 50% off. So if you want to sign up for the Celebri course, we'd be happy to have you. So Edwin.
So how does that work? Like you get a temporary license?
Yeah. So you can get a trial license, or I could loan you a license on this. Yeah.
Nice.
So if you need a loaner, I can do it. Sorry, we did see we did have some comments that came in earlier, so I apologize. I just didn't see them. So the BIMbc logo got in the way when you demonstrated the search in the top right. I'm sorry, Ivy. I don't know if it's right at the top, right underneath the blue bar. So my apologies on that. And then for Tracy, do you think Celebri could be used as an on-the-fly estimating tool with advantages over Revit, as we do a collaborative design, IPD, or other? I've not yet seen estimators using the best tools possible. And this is a question, if you compare it to Revit, BIM software is traditionally not great at this, at getting your quantity takeoffs. But in some ways, Celebri would have some advantages, but it's not like the next level of that. In terms of, like, we'd have walls, we could tell you how many walls we have, what the total volume of them are, what the total length of them are. Talk about columns or windows. Yes, we can give you a count. We can do it faster than Revit, but Revit can still do all those things. Revit can absolutely do all those things. The thing that puzzles me is that people often take the PDFs and then use Bluebeam, which is a fantastic tool, but they could also use the IFC file and actually get better 3D volumes. So I guess my answer to that question just off the top is you're probably going to have 2 or 3 solutions that you kind of use, and maybe a real Skookum one will come out. That's my answer. What do you think about that, Edwin?
Yeah, I think the count is like an easy one, right? That still has a lot of value. You're saying, yeah, just fixture counts and anything like that. It's quite. That's one thing that I liked about Celebri, is that you can create a schedule, right?
Yes.
A schedule of sorts of, like, yeah, how much of everything do I have? Where's it coming from?
Yes.
Are the roof drains matching the count that I'm getting from the mechanical?
I see. Yes. Yeah.
That's not even a rule, right? But it's something that you could set up and quickly check.
Yes. That would be, to me, the main advantage of Celebri over the BIM authoring tool, whether it's ArcCAD, whatever. They're all the same pretty much on this regard. Celebri would get you there faster because you don't have to open this big model, right? And then maybe open a model with other models that link into it. Celebri, once the information is optimized into IFC, it becomes a lot easier to get data out of it. But obviously, the next step, I think, would be to connect Power BI to all of this, and I don't think we're there yet. That would be a next level approach. So I'm looking forward to developments in Celebri. I think that might be another level to this as well. But great question. Let's take a look. Yeah. Okay. So Zoltan's echoing something you said, Edwin, which is like the difference between Revit and Celebri. Now, Revit and Celebri are not really competitive products. Is like one's an authoring tool and one's a quality tool. It's like they're kind of different. But in other words, Celebri can't draw any walls, right? so Celebri cannot replace Revit in any way, right? Revit in some ways can do, in a small way, some of the things Celebri can do because you can make schedules and reports. But yes, he's echoing what you said. that you need special skills like Dynamo to do these things. Whereas in Celibri, you just need to take my awesome course and you're off to the races. Thanks, Zoltan. Do you have another thought to that, Edwin?
No, yeah, I totally agree. Yeah,
okay.
Like a Dynamo is an option, but it requires, like you don't have that list of pre-baked recipes to choose from, right? That you can just tweak and run with. So I can see building those checks would be quite a significant investment.
I wonder if, and I'm just asking this question because I don't know Dynamo. I'm wondering if that would be a little more fragile, like if it would break a little easier than the Celibri approach.
Yeah.
My gut feeling is anything you code like that becomes very fragile if something shifts, right? Now in
we've seen some changes recently. You need to have the right packages, you need to have the right setup, and now with every release of Revit, it seems to have changed. So I've seen that, experienced that myself firsthand.
Yeah. Celibri does have some mechanisms to give you reminders. So if you notice, sometimes reminders have come up and I've closed them down. What the idea is there is you can pre-program into Celibri that before you take this step, you should do these 3 things. For example, one is, make sure that the classification is classifying properly, right? So you can build tasks into Celibri. They're not forced, they're suggestions, but that help you at least to say, well, okay, before I run this information takeoff, I should double check that everything's classified properly. So even Celibri is fragile, but you can set it to remind you to double check on things before you run it, a certain task. Okay, thanks, Zoltan, for that. Edwin, closing thoughts. Like, it's great that you're willing to share this information with your community. Lots of great tools out there. Celibri is just one of them. Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, no, I'm just saying it's still not as widely known, I think, as it should be, in my experience. And I definitely think architects, contractors, even consultants can benefit greatly. Some of those things you showed us, we can extend, right, to GFCI receptacles close to a sink or water source very easily.
Or even cable trays you mentioned overlapping that you can't get your hand over to, for maintenance.
Clearances, there's specific checks for windows or clearance in front of an object. So definitely I would recommend that you, even if you don't take the training, you look at it. On your free time, get an evaluation license and bring it up to your office, because there's a lot of value for our industry, not just thinking again for individual companies.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing. Now I'm just going to address a couple more questions and then we're going to leave. Of course, people can leave anytime they want. We've gone an hour, so we appreciate.
Yeah, thanks for sticking around.
Thanks for sticking around. You don't have to. We get, but I just want to address the question because we do appreciate the comments. Yes. So Zoltan says scripts can break. So this was just a guess on my part, but I've worked with scripts before, and scripts can break. They just always break. So that's the thing. But Dynamo is very powerful. Many Revit users love Dynamo, so that's great. One question from Petro is anyone working on developing code checks in Celibri? Like in North America, I don't think anyone is. In Finland, they're looking at doing automated building code checks with Celibri. So people upload the model, and the building codes checks are done in the background by Celibri, and you get, it kind of handles all that without drawings. Europe's way ahead of
and I would imagine they have very strong standards, right? So that whatever one architect gives is quite similar to what a different architect will give. Whereas, here we're still fighting with those classifications to cover our bases. Yeah.
Well, I would say that we have weak standards in Canada. That's the way I'd put it.
We have too many.
Even the National Building Code. Well, we have so many standards. National Building Code, and then BC has their code. Alberta has their code. So I've looked at this and said, "Hey, is this a business model?" But then I quickly got a headache and I thought about something else. But it's good to connect with people out there. Certainly in Europe, this is a thing. I have interest in this, but it's just it's to do 100%, even to do an 80% good job would be a fairly big step. But let's say you handle the 20% that are the most painful for your company, right? That's how you want to think of Solibri. Let's do the 10% that have caused us trouble, and we'll catch the rest in the shop drawings, right? So that's how I would view that, is don't try to do the whole building code. Just figure out what's the, if you look at your history over the past 10 years, 5 years, what things have you missed? And then have to go back and then try to get those into Solibri. And certainly I would be available to have those discussions with you if you wanted. Or there's also many talented people in Europe as well, and Asia. So thanks so much, everyone. Let's test it. So Pedro, I hope I'm connected LinkedIn with you, and let's talk. So thanks so much, Edwin, and to the BIM BC community.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, and thanks.
And this recording will be available immediately after. And so we appreciate everyone joining us, and wish everyone an awesome rest of their day.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye.